This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News. I'm Sophie Ikenye. Our top stories. Violent clashes between Nigerian police and members of a Shiite Muslim group in the streets of Abuja. We have the latest. Almost a week since Sudan's power-sharing deal was agreed and still no signatures. Rwanda's foreign minister defends its record on press freedom on the final day of a global conference in London. Also in the program, changing the coffee rules in Cameroon. A leading female coffee grower says farmers can boost profits by roasting coffee beans before sending to market.
And it's the second day of the quarterfinals in the Africa Cup of Nations, currently playing Côte d'Ivoire and Algeria, vying for a spot in the semi-finals.
Thanks for joining us on Focus on Africa from BBC World News. We start in Nigeria's capital, Abuja, where there's been clashes between police and Shia Muslim demonstrators. It's the third consecutive day of protests by the Islamic Movement of Nigeria. Police fired tear gas at members of the pro-Iranian group, which says it represents the country's minority Shia Muslims, demanding the release of its leader, Sheikh Ibrahim el-Zakzaky. He was imprisoned in 2015 after clashes between his followers and the army. Well, let's go live now to Abuja and speak to our correspondent, Chris Ewoko, who's been following developments for us. Chris, what happened?
Well, Sophie, today it's the third day of police grappling with the protest of Shiite members who are calling for the release of their leaders. Now, the protesters had gathered at a particular point, and they had wanted to march from that point to the center of the city where the Eagle Square is located. That's where the Civil Service Secretariat was located, but they were blocked off by a detachment of policemen who stopped them from moving forward. There was fierce engagement with police firing tear gas and gunshots to disperse them. And in the course of that, some of their leaders were arrested. Many of the protesters claim that they sustained injuries, and police arrested many more of them. But what I'm hearing right now is that about 48 members of the Shia group have been charged to court here in Abuja this evening.
Now, Chris, this is the third day of what appears to be quite intense protest, but it has been an ongoing issue, hasn't it?
Really, it's been ongoing, but the rumor of the health situation of Sheikh Ibrahim el-Zakzaky earlier in the week sparked off another round of protest when the group tried to gain access to the parliament on Tuesday and clashed with the police. Police claimed that 2 of their agents were shot in the leg and 6 others were injured using clubs and stones. Now, the members of Shiite group also say some of their 2 of their members were killed. Again, the police in Abuja say that they have been using minimum force to try to stop the protest by the Shia group, but it appears that the clashes have, in a way, been turning very violent. I mean, the protests have been turning very violent.
All right.
Just this evening, also, I got information that the similar protest is ongoing in Kaduna.
All right, just very quickly, Chris, do we know the state of the Sheikh at the moment?
Well, at the moment, aside from the members of the Shia group saying that they learned that the health of the Sheikh has deteriorated in detention, the government has not said anything about his state of health.
All right, Chris Ewoko for us with that update from Abuja. Thank you. Now, 6 days after a handshake between the African Union and the Sudan's deputy chief of the ruling military council, there is still no word on when a power-sharing agreement between the military and the opposition leaders will be signed. It should have happened today, but has been put off as the two sides negotiate over the wording of parts of the deal. Now, many have voiced doubts as to whether it will happen at all. Well, joining me in studio is the BBC's Mohamed Hashim, who was in Khartoum at the height of the protest. Mohamed, thanks for taking time to talk to us. First of all, why is there a delay in the signing of the actual agreement?
I think that's the $1 million question. If anyone could answer that question, then many people would be resting, but we don't know. We were hearing reports that this evening, as we're talking, that this deal might be signed, or the blueprint of it might be signed tonight. Well, we were told that this deal was supposed to be signed on Wednesday, but there were some technical disagreements between the two sides on the wording of the document of the agreement itself.
All right, so many people have voiced doubts as to whether it will actually be signed. Have you heard that?
Yes, I mean, many people have voiced doubt regarding to whether this deal will actually hold and become successful. That is based on 2 points. The first point is the simple fact about that thorny issue of who will be the 11th person to come to the Sovereign State Council. You have 5 military, 5 civilians, and then the 11th person would be nominated, ideally a civilian. Some have been saying that the military have been asking for a former general who has retired, who's now civilian. The other issue is regarding the whole point about an inquiry or an investigation into the killings that have happened from the 11th of April onwards. And many have doubts that the military council in its current makeup will actually honor whatever findings the investigations might come with, only because in many people's eyes it's the transitional military council that was responsible for the violence that happened in the country since President Bashir was ousted in April.
And that's where, of course, the United Nations Secretary General comes in, because he did voice some concerns too.
Yes, Antonio Guterres, speaking to the BBC, he did voice a concern regarding the future of the country. And he said something very interesting, that as far as the international community is concerned, they see the military as key to Sudan's stability and staying together as one country.
It's not a matter of trusting. It's a matter of creating the conditions in which both sides will understand that they both need this agreement. For me, it is clear that without the military, there will be a huge risk of disintegration inside Sudan. It is clear that with the military alone, first, they would not be able to control the country, and second, that would not be acceptable for the international community. It wouldn't allow for the country to be mobilized to solve its own problems. So we had to have a civilian authority with a strong military presence, and this, I think, was understood by both.
So, Mohamed, there's a lot happening in Sudan, but what is the general mood among the Sudanese people themselves?
At the moment, from what I'm looking and what I'm discerning, is that people have been very angry since the resumption of the internet service, because much more footage has come to the fore about what happened on the 3rd. The point is, many are preparing for mass demonstrations this weekend to mark 40 days since the massacre of June the 3rd.
All right, Mohamed Hashim, thank you. Well, let's now take a quick look at other stories making the headlines across Africa and the rest of the world. South Africa's anti-corruption chief is under investigation for corruption. Busisiwe Mukwebane, who's responsible for investigating bribery and dishonesty in high office, stands accused of abusing her position to wage a dirty political campaign designed to favor corruption elites within the governing ANC party. Now, Ms. Mukwebane denies the allegations. Tanzania's government says they still don't know whether the missing journalist Ozori Rwanda is dead or alive. It follows an interview given by the country's foreign minister Palamagamba Kabudi to this program, in which he said Mr. Rwanda was not the only person who disappeared and died in the refugee area. He hasn't been seen since 2017. Now, a government spokesperson claimed Mr. Kabudi is being quoted out of context. Now, a new study suggests that people who consume a lot of sugary drinks, including pure fruit juice, are at a higher risk of developing cancer. Scientists did not establish a direct causal link, and doctors say more information is needed, and people on the streets of Kenya's capital, Nairobi, seemed to agree.
I actually think sugar is linked to cancer, but that is if you take too much of it. Yeah, but we take sugar all the time, so, and we are still good, so yeah, I think it's okay.
I take like 3 drinks a day that has sugar. When I went to the doctor, he told me to reduce sugar and fats in my body.
The lifestyles we live, we don't do enough exercises or enough work that utilizes the calories that is in those sugars. So the much we take into our bodies affects our health.
Now, Rwanda's foreign minister has defended the country's record on press freedom. His comments come as a global media conference promoting robust journalism comes to a close here in London. My colleague Peter Okwoche asked the foreign minister Richard Sezibera why Rwanda was ranked 155th out of 180 countries monitored by the media freedom group Reporters Without Borders.
Yes, but who is Reporters Without Borders and who should be the ranking? I think the best ranking should come from the people themselves who are served by the media. And if you come and ask Rwandans, and if you ask the Rwandan media, it is a free country.
Do you believe that critical journalism is essential to the development of a country?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, the government of Rwanda has invested in critical journalism. That is why, as an example, our media and journalists have been important in our fight against corruption. They have exposed corruption, they have exposed government inefficiency, they have criticized government, and they continue to do so.
Some people will find that ironic because of a recent law that the government has been pushing, saying that anyone who is critical of the government, even draws a cartoon of a senior government official, could be sent to prison.
Well, that law went through a debate. Debates in Parliament, it's about a majority. There are people who did not believe in those particular provisions, including...
But your government pushed it. Your government pushed it.
No, to the contrary. There are people in government, me included, who did not believe in those sections of that law. And some Rwandans challenged it. The court threw it out. It's now back in Parliament. That is an exercise of democracy. So I do not see what the criticism is all about. It went through the normal process. It's now back in Parliament. The debate is about its amendment. How more democratic can you be?
I mean, even if I want to talk from a personal point of view, if you're working for the BBC, I cannot even come and report in your country.
Why not?
The BBC has been banned. I mean, our Great League service.
BBC has not been banned. You can come and report from Rwanda. In fact, I invite you to come.
Well, let's move on now. Patricia Tomiano Andam Njoya owns one of Cameroon's largest private coffee plantations. Her 150-hectare farm produces, on average, 12 tons of coffee every year. But what sets her apart from other producers is her drive to roast the raw beans locally before marketing. Now, this allows her to make 3 times the price of raw beans. The BBC's Kilian Chimtongala went to meet her where she farms in Cameroon's West region.
Gathered around a table, a group of people sip away at their coffee cups. The coffee is roasted locally, unlike most places where beans go unprocessed.
From farm to cup, that is the slogan in this coffee house located in Cameroon's capital, Yaoundé. It is a huge revolution, and it's basically telling you that instead of exporting the coffee beans, why don't you just roast it locally and transform it for local consumption and possibly for export to neighboring countries?
The person behind the change is Patricia Tomiano Njoya.
We promote the consumption of Cameroonian coffee because it has quality. We can have many consumers at the level of Cameroon, and that is why every year we organize coffee festivals, and that has helped farmers to discover coffee because they were used to selling only the green beans, but today, with traditional methods, they roast, grind, and drink their coffee.
It's perhaps through this local transformation that Cameroon can make the world wake up to the smell of its coffee.
Local processing comes with an uptick of profits for farmers.
It's because when you understand how much value can be added when you transform the coffee, you really understand why it's important for us to transform the coffee. For For instance, 1 kilogram of green coffee, when it is sold at the port in Douala, it can cost 1,500. But once you roast it here in store, the same kilogram of coffee that cost 1,500 jumps to 6,000 francs CFA. And if you decide to prepare it even further into a cup of coffee, 1 kilogram of coffee can at least bring you a profit of about 20,000 francs.
That means the farmer can be making the equivalent of $34 on every kilogram of transformed coffee. Cameroon's coffee sector contributes significantly to the country's GDP and is a lifeline for some 400,000 farmers. Coffee was first introduced to Cameroon by German colonialists who realized that the country's western highlands and grass fields offered the perfect conditions to grow this prized commodity. In the early 1990s, the sector was engulfed in crisis as prices plummeted and the government cut producer subsidies. Many farmers replaced their coffee plantations with food crops as a result, but not Tomaino Damjoya.
We did not want to fell our coffee trees because we knew that coffee brings money. And with regard to global consumption, it's proven that there will always be global demand. So we actually sensitized people in our area that they should not cut down their coffee trees, as it was the case with others.
With global coffee consumption set to grow by 5.5% in the next 5 years, Tomaino Damjoya now believes more investments are needed to boost production and for producers to embrace local processing. This belief is shared by the Cameroon government that says 40% of the country's coffee, up from just about 10% today, should be transformed locally by next year. Kilian Chimtom Gala, BBC News, Yaoundé.
This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News. Still to come, in just an hour's time, kickoff for the Madagascar-Tunisia game. Will Madagascar continue their fairy tale run? I'm Sophie Ikenya and you're watching Focus on Africa from BBC World News. The top stories on this program: violent clashes between Nigerian police and members of a Shiite Muslim group in the streets of Abuja for a third day. Almost a week since Sudan's power-sharing agreement, there is still no word on when the deal between the military and the opposition leaders will be signed. You're watching BBC Focus on Africa. It's time now for some sport. Let's join Mimi Fawaz, who is in Cairo for us. Mimi.
Hi, Sophie. Yes, it's the second day of the quarterfinals here at the Africa Cup of Nations. 2 matches taking place today. The first one that is currently on the way is Côte d'Ivoire, who are taking on Algeria, trying to get a spot in the semi-finals. And the latest so far in that match is Sofiane Feghouli, who opened the scoring for Algeria in the game. But come second half, we had as well the Ivory Coast, who leveled with Jonathan Kodja, leveling there for them. And as well, Algeria had an opportunity to go ahead, Baghdadi missing a penalty. So we'll make sure to bring you all the latest from that match a little later on in the show. But let's move on to the quarterfinal highlights from yesterday, where Senegal defeated Benin 1-0. The only goal of the match coming there from Idrissa Gana Gueye, the Everton midfielder, who was assisted by Liverpool's Sadio Mane, who himself had 2 goals that were ruled offside by VAR, which was for the first time introduced here at the Africa Cup of Nations from the quarterfinals. Now, they'll be waiting a little later on for the other match in the quarterfinals between Madagascar and Tunisia to see who they'll be facing. But their coach, Aliou Cisse, says that any team can spring up a surprise.
At this
stage, I've said it before and I'll say it again. Anyone can beat anyone. Madagascar is a team that we know, and Tunisia is a very good team that have done great, so we can't underestimate anyone. We'll prepare in a calm manner, and with all of our focus to play in this semi-final.
For sure, we had the ambition to go home as late as possible, but we also knew we had to go home at some point. So, of course, we're disappointed tonight. But I will repeat myself, they can be proud of what they've accomplished and how they did in this competition. And from there, we can say this is a start and something we can use to continue to move forward and to progress and get better.
Michel Dussy, of course, speaking there. Benin, their first time reaching the quarterfinals of this competition. Now, the second African team that booked their place in the semifinals were Nigeria against South Africa, a match that much anticipated by a lot of African football teams. Two big teams, those are. And Nigeria defeating South Africa 2-1 with Samuel Chukwueze opening the scoring for the Super Eagles, one of the youngest goal scorers at the Africa Cup of Nations at the age of 20. And, of course, William Troost Ekong in the 89th minute, the defender getting that winning goal for Nigeria. Now, they'll be waiting for the match a little later on between Cote d'Ivoire and Algeria to see who they'll be facing in the semi-finals. But their captain, John Obi Mikel, is not fazed by who they'll be facing.
I don't know. Well, we've beaten them before. We beat Algeria in 2013. We beat Algeria also in New York last year, I think, or so. So we've beaten them before, so why not? We can do it again.
Yeah, look, it's a bit difficult to concede late in the match, and then I think if we didn't concede that goal, we'd have gotten more confidence and gotten to play a little bit more. But then they got that late goal, and then it was just over for us.
So as mentioned, the other quarterfinals match, which will be taking place in just over an hour's time, is between Tunisia and Madagascar. And Madagascar, what a surprise package. Debutants in this tournament, a fairy tale run. But the road has not been easy for them, as they describe for us. Finishing top of Group B ahead of Nigeria and Guinea, and with a spot in the quarterfinals, the Barriers of Madagascar are one of the fairy tales in the history of the Africa Cup of Nations.
We are so proud of what we are achieving. We haven't much to give, you know. We only have those little moments to make our country feel proud. I know it's difficult back home, and I know it's important for them to have this little light of hope and happiness. It's the best.
Even the goal celebration is a symbol of the country.
Yes, the horns. When I scored, I made this. It's the zebu of Madagascar, this animal we have at Mada. So we said to ourselves that every time someone scores, we should do this to celebrate our country.
But before the Africa Cup of Nations, the Barriers had experienced the worst with horrible international trips.
À 4 heures du matin, je me rappelais très bien, à 4 heures du matin, on dormait dans le couloir comme ça.
I remember waking at 4 a.m. We were sleeping in the corridor of the airport, and all of a sudden we heard some noises, people screaming. I saw the Cameroonian team. All the big names were there, Samuel Eto'o, Rigobert Song, and Boma. They were all here, and we were sleeping in the airport with the Madagascar tracksuits. I swear this day I was so ashamed. It sticks in my head. But the international trips were always like this.
Ranked 108th by FIFA before the Africa Cup of Nations, the Malagasy team hopes to finally stop being anonymous.
When they presented the logo, there was the big Africa but no Madagascar. It might be a human mistake, but it shows where we are. I just hope that this AFCON will not be just a little phase and that the future generations will be able to benefit from all this. Because in the end, okay, we're playing this AFCON and we create a sensation, but those I hope who will benefit from this are my children. I hope this will continue. There has been a lot of work done and some more to do, so I hope people will take over and build on this.
What an incredible story. Okay, we're into extra time between Cote d'Ivoire and Algeria. For now, it's 1-1. Back to you, Sophie.
Thank you, Mimi Fawaz, there for us in Cairo. Let's focus on Africa for now. Thank you for your company. Bye-bye.